Good evening, everyone. We're middle of Iggeres HaKodesh, Siman Aleph. So let's recap a little what we spoke about last week. So this is a letter that the Alter Rebbe writes to the Minyanim of Anash, the Chassidish shuls that were throughout Eastern Europe. And as we'll see later on in the letter, not this week, but Mir Tashem next week, the Alter Rebbe is going to have different instructions regarding davening, regarding the way the shul should be conducted and davening should be conducted. But first, Alter Rebbe begins by talking about the good news that he had heard, that his request that he had made the previous years, that there should be a chalukas hashas, that they should divide the shas, every single congregation, all the members of the congregation should divide the shas, so that happened. And the beginning of the Alter Rebbe's letter is devoted to talking about what is the greatness of shas, what is the greatness of Gemara, and specifically Torah Shebaal Peh. And in terms of Torah Shebaal Peh, the most prominent part of Torah Shebaal Peh, you might want to say the most foundational text of Torah Shebaal Peh, is the Gemara. So what is the advantage of learning Gemara? And to explain that, the Alter Rebbe draws on the pasuk from the Eishes Chayil Chagra Ba'oz Masneha V'Ta'amez Reiseha. So as we said last week, the Eishes Chayil is directed in many different directions. I had a while back, I had a guest came to my house, a bacher, and he tells me, "Tell me, Rabbi, what is the Eishes Chayil really about?" I was at the home of someone, they weren't Hasidim, and the husband was singing the Eishes Chayil to his wife, and it was so romantic. But we're Lubavitchers, we don't believe that really Eishes Chayil is about the actual woman. Who is the Eishes Chayil really? And the truth is, thank you very much, the truth is that, as we spoke last week, Eishes Chayil is true about the feminine on every level. On every single level, we have the Eishes Chayil. An Olam Haza Hagashmi, in this physical world, where there's the masculine and the feminine, there's the man and the woman. So Eishes Chayil definitely is talking about the woman. And the woman who holds the house together, the glue of the house, the foundation of the house, the wife and the mother, without whom, what we call the Iggeres habayis, without whom the house wouldn't be a house, the house would cease to function. Baruch Hashem, I'm lucky enough to know such a woman, and I could say that everything about that says in Eishes Chayil is 100% correct. Everything, right? All the different praises to the woman are true in a very practical sense. And then it wouldn't be fair to say that Eishes Chayil is also referring to other things. Eishes Chayil refers, as we spoke last week, to the feminine on every single level. So therefore, in the relationship between Yidden and Hashem, we are the Eishes Chayil. So the Eishes Chayil is talking about us. It's not also. Eishes Chayil is about the feminine, and it is applied in every single level of masculine and feminine on that level. And as we said last week, there are also other applications for Eishes Chayil. But in Tanya over here, we're focused on the one understanding of Eishes Chayil, which is that it's talking about Knesset Yisrael. It's talking about Klal Yisrael, which is Hashem's Eishes Chayil. One of the many applications of the Eishes Chayil.
Amen. Perfect.
So, the Alter Rebbe is going to zoom in to one pasuk, the pasuk of Chagra Ba'oz Masneha V'Ta'amez Reiseha, which means she girds her loins with strength, and that strength and she strengthens, or that strengthens her arms. So if this is talking about Klal Yisrael, so we have to understand that there is Oiz and there is the Masnayim. There's the Masnayim, there's the loins of Klal Yisrael. As we mentioned last week, the loins, the Masnayim is the core area of the body, the midsection of the body, which contains the lower section of the torso and the area of the hips. And Chagra Ba'oz Masneha, we have to gird, Klal Yisrael girds the Masnayim, the loins, with Oiz. What is Oiz? So the Alter Rebbe says Oiz is Torah. But more specifically, Oiz is Torah Shebaal Peh. So the function of Torah Shebaal Peh is to reinforce and strengthen the masnayim. We don't know yet what the masnayim is. I mean, we learned about it last week. But at this point so far, we don't know yet what the masnayim are, but we know that whatever the masnayim are, we need ois. They need to be strengthened with some extra ois, and ois is Torah Shebaal Peh. Why is ois Torah Shebaal Peh? You know, Torah is both chesed and gevura. And in Kabbalah it's explained more specifically that Torah Shebiksav is chesed, and Torah Shebaal Peh is gevura. Torah Shebiksav is the ultimate chesed. It's a gift from Hashem. Torah Shebaal Peh is not a gift from Hashem, like Torah Shebiksav. Torah Shebaal Peh is the fruit of our labor, of our work. And Torah Shebaal Peh actually is a limiting factor, which is why it has to do with Gevura. By way of example, we know that the request to Hashem, or actually when we talk about Hashem bringing rain, say Mashiv Haruach Hamayir Dagashem. In which bracha is that? That's in the second bracha of Shemona Esrei, which is known as, the second bracha is the bracha of Ata Gibar. Now the question is, why would talking about rain, which rain seemingly is chesed, why would you have that in the bracha which is about Gevura, Ata Gibar? And the answer is because rain is known as Gevuras Geshamim. There's the concept of Gevuras Geshamim, but that doesn't really answer the question. Why is it called Gevuras Geshamim if rain l'chayr is chesed? So the answer that's brought down in Chassidus is, we all know the Gemara about, or some of us might know the Gemara about Chonei Ma'agel when he davened for rain, and it started pouring. It started, as they say, raining cats and dogs. And Chonei Ma'agel tells Hashem, your chesed is so great, we cannot take that chesed. We need your chesed in smaller little bits and pieces. So Hashem gives us rain, He gives us water, so things can grow, and the world can function. But if Hashem were to plunk down the rain upon us as like buckets of or a marble of water, we would not be able to take it. That would be too much chesed. So what does Hashem do instead? There's gevuras. What does the gevura do? The gevura cuts up the water into tiny little pieces, tiny little drops. The gevura is what allows us to actually be able to accept Hashem's chesed, which is why when we talk about rain, we talk about gevuras geshamim, and we talk about it in Ata Gibar, because sometimes if there's too much chesed, we can't take it. The Torah Shebiksav is Hashem's chesed. It's enormous. It's an enormous, huge gift from Hashem. But for us to be able to appreciate it, we need Chazal to take it and to cut it up into little tiny bits of understandable pieces, and into Simonim and to Seifim and Shulchan Aruch and Sifkatams. That is the Gevura of Torah Shebaal Peh, is that it takes the infinite wisdom that's in Torah Shebiksav, and it breaks it up into tiny little bite-sized pieces that we should be able to process it. So that's why when we're talking about ois, the ois element of Torah, the gevura element of Torah, is Torah Shebaal Peh. So when the pasuk says chagra be'ois masneha, that Klal Yisrael, we gird our loins with ois, we strengthen our loins with ois. What is the ois? Ois is Torah Shebaal Peh. File this in your somewhere in your brain, because now we're going to get back to that. But right now, the first thing we have to figure out is, what are the Misnayim? And once we know what the Misnayim are, which is really what we spent the rest of the time last week talking about, then we can go back and figure out why we need the ois, which is Torah Shebaal Peh, in order to strengthen the Misnayim. So the Alter Rebbe says, last week the Alter Rebbe says the Misnayim is emunah, or emunah in Hashem, because at the core of everything is our emunah. The Misnayim, again, the core of the body, the midsection of the body, the loins, they support everything. They support the heart, they support the arms, they support the head, they support the upper body, they connect the feet to the body, so they support everything, and also they get a person, if you want to go somewhere, without the loins you have nothing. I mean, practically you think about it, like you have the head, right, and you have this part of the body, so the head, we know what its function is. And we have the arms that are function, and the heart, and then you have lower down you have the feet. We know what the feet's function is. You have to go places. But this whole little area over here, what's its purpose? Its purpose is, it's the center. It's the core which supports everything, holds everything up. And the core, by a Yid, the core of everything is Amunah. So the Masnaim of a Yid is Amunah. So the Alter Rebbe says, the head of a Yid is a person's Seichel. The arms of a Yid are Ava and Yira. The right arm is Ava, and the left arm is Yira. And the feet, although the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it, but the Rebbe explains the feet are Tefillah, because that's what allows you to climb up the ladder, the Sulam, the ladder to Hashem. But none of this is possible without Emunah. Without Emunah, you wouldn't do any mitzvahs, you wouldn't have any Ava, you wouldn't have any Yira, you wouldn't think about Hashem, you wouldn't think about Torah, you wouldn't daven. So the bottom line, at the core of everything, is the Emunah ha'amitis in Hashem. So the first thing that the Emunah supports is the head. Meaning the first thing is that if you believe in Hashem, so then what? You think about Hashem's greatness. You think about Hashem's greatness, not only in an abstract way, but as Alter Rebbe also says, we think about Hashem's kindness towards us also. The fact that we're Bnei Yisrael Am Kirevei, and as Alter Rebbe we discussed at length last week, the idea of Hoydei Alaris V'Shamayim Vayarem Kerem Liyamai, that in the heavens, in Olam Haba over there, you have only Hoydei, you have only a ray from Hashem. But the Keren, the principle is La'amai, for Klal Yisrael. Livnei Yisrael Am Kirevei. When we do mitzvahs, we connect to the Eibishter himself. So that's all the head. The head is the Hizbaininus in the greatness of Hashem, number one, and also in the kindness of Hashem. Again, all of this is supported by the Masnaim. All of this is supported by a Yid's Emunah. What comes from the Hizbaininus? The two arms, Ava v'Yira. When you think about the greatness of Hashem, when you think about Hashem's kindness, and let's do this inside. We're going to start the last line of page Kuf Beis, which is opposite of page 202. As water reflects a face, from this contemplation, when a person contemplates the greatness of Hashem, what's born? Dechilu or dechimu. Awe of Hashem, love of Hashem, sichliyim, eitiviyim, whether intellectually based emotions or whether more instinctively based emotions. We're not going to get into the difference between the two, but that's discussed at length in L'Kuti Amarim. And it causes liyas b'chenes tzoak libam al Hashem. The causes a yid to cry out to Hashem. A b'chenes rish be'esh, or a fiery love, v'shal heves aza, a burning flame, b'chenes ratzi, with a desire. And afterwards, what does that lead to? The same as Baininus also leads you to return. In other words, the love is like departing, is like the fire which is looking to depart. But then you have to return. The awe and the reverence, the fear of Hashem in one's heart. To be absolutely ashamed of oneself in the face of Hashem's greatness. That is the smile. We know we have Yeminoi Tichabkeni, the love of Hashem can embrace us. That's the Yemin. The smile, the left side, is the Gevura, which so to say pushes us away, pushes us back, and tells us, go act, go do mitzvahs. As it says, first, the Yidden had a tremendous love for Hashem. In fact, the Neshamas actually departed their bodies, we know, out of their tremendous love for Hashem because of after every dibur. But ultimately, the people, they saw, vayanu, they trembled, vayamdu merachik, and they stood from afar, which the idea of the love is followed by the fear, and the fear is the motivator actually to go to Torah mitzvahs. Chulu v'hein b'chinas hazroyis v'aguf shabenefesh. Those are the two arms, is Ava v'Yira, and the guf, the body, is the mitzvahs which are in the nefesh. All of this is supported by the Masnaim. So again, the head is supported, the arms, everything is based on the Emunah. You think about the greatness of Hashem, you have Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and you do mitzvahs. So usually we try to connect what we're learning with the Parsha. So usually we do it at the end, but just if we could take a moment over here. So here we're talking about, yeah?
Why is this based on the Emunah? Why is it?
Because without Emunah, everything crashes down. Like it's the core. Without that, you have nothing. If you have no emunah, then there is no isbaininus in the greatness of Hashem. There is no ava v'yira. There is no kiyum mitzvahs. There is no tefillah. Everything. What is the yisoid by a yid? The yisoid by a yid is everything begins with emunah. Emunah in Hashem.
Emunah, belief that the Eibishter exists.
Emunah amitis b'Hashem echad ein seif baruch hu the u'mem malak kolam and v'seiv kolam and v'las asar panim minei l'mayla. That in case this was last week what the emunah is. Yeah, the emunah and Achdos Hashem. So this week's parsha begins with ve'elu telos Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. And all the Mefarshim obviously asked the question. Why what?
By the
Right, very good. Why the redundancy? Ve'elu telos Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. So there are many answers given. Many answers are given. But one of the answers that's given is these are the children of Yitzchak ben Avram. But you would think, okay, Yitzchak was the son of Avram. Shmuel was also the son of Avram. And in fact, if you look at Yitzchak and you look at Yishmael, who more resembled Avram? It seems Yishmael was more resembled Avraham more. You know, Yishmael was Chesed. And Avram was Chesed. Yitzchak was Gevurah. And by the way, the same thing is also, Esav also is Gevurah. It's interesting how, so you would think that although the Taka Avram was Yitzchak's father, but Avram was the father of Yitzchak, he was also the father of Yishmael. In fact, you might argue that Avram had a closer resemblance to Yishmael than to Yitzchak. They had opposite personalities.
The Torah says that Yitzchak looked exactly like Abraham.
We'll get there in a moment.
Not Yishmael.
We'll get there in a moment. So therefore the Torah says, no, Avram helos Yitzchak. Now, Avram is Yitzchak's father. Last week's parsha, when we ended off Eila helos Yishmael, but it doesn't say Avram helos Yishmael. It doesn't say that. There's Avram is connected to Yitzchak, not to Yishmael. Not to Yishmael. This is Chesed and this is Gevurah. This is Avos Hashem and this is Yiras Hashem. That's fine. The same Hisbaininus in the greatness of Hashem can lead you to Chesed, to Ava, can lead you to Gevurah, can lead you to Yira. It leads to both. They're both Chesed and Gevurah of Kedusha, both come from the same place. They both extend from the same body, the same heart. They're the two arms of the same person. Yishmael was Chesed, but he was Chesed of Klippa. So externally, maybe he was using the same tool as Avram, but in essence, they were opposites from each other. Avram's whole life was about Hashem. Yitzchak's whole life was about Hashem. The question was, in which way did the emotions express themselves? But ultimately, they had the exact same goal in life, which is serving Hashem. And they're both misbehaving in the greatness of Hashem. Avram, by him, it expressed itself more in the area of Ava, although Avram definitely had Yiras, Hashem also, but Yitzchak, it expressed itself more in the area of Gvura, but ultimately it was the same Masnayim, the same Emunah, the same base, the same everything. Yishmael, that's like saying, imagine you have two philosophers, okay? One of them is a phenomenal speaker, and one of them is a phenomenal writer. And then you have a person who writes coloring books. Now, would you say that the writer, the big philosopher, is he more similar to the speaker or to the comic book writer? To the speaker. But they both use pens. And the philosopher doesn't use pens. Okay, but that's a very chitzoniistic thing. The question is, what is on the inside, what is the... Over there, obviously, the person writing the books and the speaker, they share everything. It's just their tools are different. Avraham and Yitzchak had different tools, but their whole life was the same thing. And here we have also the same idea. The Alter Rebbe is saying the same is Baininus, the same Reish gives way to both these arms, the two Zrayes, which is Chesed and Gvura. They're both outgrowths of the same place.
Where do we see Chesed from Yishmael?
In Sifrei Kabbalah, it talks about how Yishmael is Chesed of Klippa, and that's why the Yishmaelim are very into Znus and into Niyuf and to all these wrong relationships, because that's misdirected Chesed. Right. Whereas Yishmael is Al-Char B'Chatichya, is bloodthirsty, that's Gevura. Esav. Yeah. By the way, till today, the Arabs are nicer people than the Christians. They're warmer people. They have that the Chmasas Archim and they have a certain what? Yeah, there's a warmth to them and a chesed to them which you don't find by Bnei Esav, but it's chesed of Klippa. Sorry, what? No one is one-dimensional. No one is only chesed or only gvura. We're talking about what the dominant trait is by them. Now. So you mentioned this interesting thing. It says this week's parsha. Rashi says that there were the Litzani Hadir. The how do you say it? The comedians, beautiful. The comedians of the generation. Scoffers, yeah. That's an archaic English word. The scoffers, right? The jokers, right? The people who are busy putting up, sending out memes on WhatsApp all day. So they were saying, "Mavi Melech Nisabra Sara." It's not Avram's son; it's Avimelech's son. And by the way, part of their proof was, take a look. This is Gevura. This is Chesed. How can he be his son? So what did Hashem do to address that situation? So Tsar klaster panav shel Yitzchak. Hashem went and he made the Yitzchak should look like Avraham Avinu. And as the Marsha understands it, actually, it's not that he was born that way. Yitzchak's face actually changed in order to facilitate this miracle. So the Rebbe speaks about this in the Sikha, and the Rebbe asks, it sounds like here Hashem had to make this big miracle that Yitzchak should look like Avraham Avinu. Why is that a miracle? Why did it take any extra special effort? Children look like their fathers very often. Why is this something extraordinary that Hashem had to do something unusual over here and make the Yitzchak should look like Avram? And the Rebbe suggests that normally a person's face actually is a reflection of their personality. A stern person has a stern face. A kind person has a kind face. You could look at a person and you can see a lot on the person's face. Because Avram and Yitzchak were diametrically opposed in terms of personality, therefore naturally they look different. They actually look different. Avram had a chesed face, and Yitzchak had a gevura face. That's by nature that way, and that's the way Yitzchak was born. So Hashem had to do something special and make the Yitzchak should look like Avram Avinu, because that's not in the natural order of things. Naturally, Yitzchak should have had a face which was more of a gvura face. And the Rebbe actually has an interesting chayra from this. The Rebbe asks a question, so if one of their faces had to change, so why didn't Hashem change Avram's face to look like Yitzchak? Why change Yitzchak to look like Avram? Okay, so you can answer, practically speaking, Avram at this point is 100 years old, and Yitzchak was just born, so maybe Avram's face, but in Torah there's no such thing as a practical answer. Everything has depth. There's reasons for everything. Everything is and the Rebbe says the Hira is, here in this case it's equal. Should Avram look like Yitzchak, or should Yitzchak look like Avram? Should I turn the Chesed to look like Gvura, or should I turn the Gvura to look like Chesed? If there's ever a question, an equal question, whether to lean towards Chesed or lean towards Gvura, lean towards Chesed. So if the question was, should Avram look more Gvuradik, or should Yitzchak look more Chesedik? The answer is always, let Yitzchak look more Chesedik, is always error on the side of Chesed.
We're in a world where a lot of people are wearing masks. How can you see Chesed or Gevura on somebody's face if they're wearing a mask?
I guess you got to have a conversation with them. It's a little harder. Yeah.
What does that say about the world?
That's a good question and totally beyond my pay grade. Yeah. Okay. So we've established what the Misnaim are. The Misnaim is our Emunah in Hashem. The Emunah which supports the head, which supports the arms, it supports the Seichel, it supports the Midas. However, Mi hu anesin koyach ve'ois lebechines Masnaim. What is it that gives the koyach and the ois to the Masnaim? Lahamidu l'kaim ha'reish v'azrayis. What gives the extra strength and energy to the Masnaim, which is to the Emunah? In other words, Dr. Rebbe is saying over here, the Emunah itself, it requires infusion of strength. Because left on its own, it's not strong enough. The Emunah of a Yid on its own is not strong enough to constantly support the Izbaininus and the Midas. It needs constant reinforcement. It needs to be strengthened. And what is that? That is through learning specifically the halachos and Torah Shebal Peh, which the Gemara is full of them. This is why the Rebbe is addressing this in the letter where he's talking about the significance of finishing Shas. When you finish Shas, basically all the halachos of Torah Shebal Peh, almost all of them are contained in the Gemara. Why? What is special about the Torah Shebal Peh? Shehi bechin is Gili Ratzon Ha'elyon. It is the Gilui of Ratzon Ha'elyon. I'm going to read some words over here, and then we obviously have to backtrack a little and explain what we're saying. The Eiraisa mechachma hidenafkas, because Torah emerges from Chachma. This is the Zohar tells us. But when we say it emerges from Chachma, it doesn't mean it's sourced in Chachma. It emerges. The source of Torah, is higher than Chachma. And that is the Ratzon Ha'elyon. Okay.
How could it be high and that's the source?
So let's talk a little about this. The Alter Rebbe says Ratzon is higher than Chachma. Hashem's Ratzon is higher than his Chachma, and it is the source of his Chachma. So let's talk about it in human terms. Let's talk about our Ratzon and our Chachma. Which one is higher, Chachma or Ratzon? And obviously when we ask which one's higher, you have to right away define what the word higher means, because we're not talking spatially, we're not talking 3D over here, but we're talking about, in terms of the neshama, our nefesh, there are higher faculties and lower faculties. Higher means closer and nearer to me. Lower is farther from my essence, from my core. If I explain to you an idea, using the example that I always give, if I explain to you that the idea and the logic behind 2 + 2 = 4, and then I talk to you also, I explain to you that I have a desire for a certain something. I have a desire to finish Shas. Okay? Following on the conversation here about Siyum HaShas. What is the difference between my description of 2 + 2 = 4 and my description of my desire to finish Shas? When I tell you 2 + 2 = 4 and I explain it to you, we're talking presuming you didn't know this beforehand, it's news to you. But obviously that's a very basic idea, but any concept I explain, am I telling you something about myself? No. I'm telling you an idea which I also understood, I picked up from outside of me. It's an idea which exists independent of me, independent of you, independent of anyone. If everyone in the world forgot 2 + 2 = 4, that wouldn't change the fact of it. When I tell you of a desire, a ratzon that I have, I'm telling you about me. I'm not telling you something which is outside of me. Ratzon is me. My seichel are things that I pick up outside of me. And because they're not intrinsically, essentially me, you can understand it as much as I can. My ratzon, I can't explain to you, I can't teach you my ratzon. Meaning I could tell you what my ratzon is, you can understand what I'm saying. I could teach you a concept in seichel, I can't teach you my ratzon, because I can't teach you me. My ratzon is me. Whereas seichel is something I've picked up. So when we talk about ratzon being higher than seichel, in terms of in my personality, ratzon is me, and seichel is something that I've added onto myself, which is obviously not as closely associated with my core, with my essence, as my ratzon is. So ratzon is higher than chachma, and the same thing is true with Hashem, because again, we are only a mashal for above. The by Hashem also, Hashem has his ratzon. The ratzon is the mitzvahs. Hashem's 613 mitzvahs. That's what Hashem's ratzon is, that you should do those mitzvahs. And then there's a chachma and Torah. The ratzon is higher than the seichel. That's number one. But it's also, the ratzon is higher, is also the source of the seichel. Is the source of Hashem's chachma. What does that mean? In science, scientists and physicists, they're constantly engaged in Chokhmah. They're trying to figure things out. They're trying to figure out the logic of the world, the logic of Hashem's creation. So they examine something, they examine the facts, and then they try to figure out, why is it this way? They always start with the facts. They never start with the seichel. So, for example, scientists will tell you, they see, we have two eyes. Why do we have two eyes? So they'll tell you, because if you only had one eye, you wouldn't have depth perception. You would only see things in 2D, not in 3D. So they're dealing with an established fact, which is that we have two eyes, and then they're trying to figure it out. It's not as if the scientists sat down with a blank piece of paper and said, how many eyes should people have? Let's figure this out al pi seichel. And whatever the most logical thing is, that is what's going to be. No, you start with the facts and you figure out the facts. And by the way, if the facts will be different, meaning if we had three eyes or one eye, the scientists will tell you why that's the case. Because the facts always are before the seichel. So fire goes up and water goes down, and parents love their children, and the scientists will give you a reason for everything. But it's not as if they sit down and say, should parents love their children, logically? Yeah, no, maybe. And if that was the question, they probably would come to different conclusions. Maybe they would say society would be better off if we loved everyone equally. Maybe they would say parents should love their children under certain circumstances. Maybe they would say water should go up and fire should go down. But they deal with certain realities, and then they have to make sense out of those realities. Kacha mamish al derech mashal is with the Eibishter. The Eibishter has Ratzon. He has desire for 613 mitzvahs. When I add in the 7 mitzvahs derabanan, 620, these are his desires. Everything else, the Rabbanan comes from these 613 or 620. That's what he wants. And it originates as simple fact, the simple fact of Hashem's Ratzon. There is no reason why he wants them. That is what he wants. After the fact, then it enters Hashem's Chachma, and suddenly we figure out reasons for it. But the reasons aren't the real reasons for it. That's figuring out the reasons after the fact. After the fact that we already have Hashem's Ratzon. And by the way, that's why there's certain mitzvahs that don't have any reasons. They remain chukim. These are reasons that weren't mislabish in Chachma. These are reasons that these are mitzvahs, these are Ratzon, which come to us directly from Hashem's Ratzon without even entering Chachma. But every mitzvah originates in Ratzon, which is higher than Chachma. So ultimately, every single mitzvah is illogical. Zois chukas ha-Torah, that even though it's talking about paraduma, zois chukas ha-Torah, because really the whole Torah is that way. So Ratzon is that, and that's why we say, Eiraisa mechachma nafkas. Torah emerges from Chachma, meaning we're learning Torah, we're getting the Chachma. But really, what's its source? Where does it start out at? It didn't start out in Chachma. It emerges from Chachma, but it started out in Hashem's Ratzon. And this is a very important understanding of what mitzvahs are. The reasons for mitzvahs were after the fact. We figured out. We gave, there's also wonderful reasons for it, but that's not the ultimate nekuda. And this explains, we know that one of the very important yisoidus in Yiddishkeit is the idea of zois ha-Torah lo tehei muchlefes. Torah is never changing. Mitzvahs never change. Period, ever. Now, what's the logic behind this? Why can't mitzvahs change? Now, I understand why we can't change mitzvahs, because if we would be able to change mitzvahs, that would be a disaster. Be able to decide, today. But why can't Hashem decide to change mitzvahs? It's 4,000 years later, 3,500 years later, Hashem said, you know what? Change my mind. I used to want you to take a lulav and a lulav adas, a esrog adas from the ravis. But I think, I've noticed that srigim have become very expensive. So I think this from now on we'll do a lulav and a lulav and a hadas and a rava and a pineapple or a pomegranate. Why can't Hashem decide that? If Hashem decides that, how would He transmit that to us? Through a Navi, right? So imagine a Navi comes one day and says to us, guys, important update. We have a software update. The update is that Hashem told me that from now on, no more esrig, pomegranate. That's what He decided. That's what He wants. Now, and we're talking here about an established Navi and a tzaddik. You know what we do?
Kill him.
We kill the guy.
Navi Sheker.
Navi Sheker. Why? Why isn't Hashem entitled to change his mind about something? Why is this Why is that so? Why is that a fact? Why didn't Hashem give himself any wiggle room? Why can't circumstances change so his desires change? It's actually a question that the Iggeres asks. The Iggeres asks this question. The Sefer Iggeres. Rabbi Yosef Albo. And what's the nukud, the answer? If the desire follows a reason, then if the reason changes, the desire changes. If your ratzon comes from your chachma, so my mind tells me about certain conditions, or I'm looking for a certain result. There's a reason for my desire, so the circumstances could change, and therefore I could change, and therefore my desire could change also. But what if the ratzon is a ratzon atzmi? In the words over here, we talk about ratzon ha'elyon. You've bumped across into these words many times, ratzon ha'elyon. Most people think that ratzon ha'elyon means the ratzon of the one above. Ratzon ha'elyon really means the highest ratzon. Everything is ratzon. Everything Hashem wants. If Hashem didn't want it, it wouldn't be here. This cup is also Hashem's ratzon. Kol asher chafetz, Hashem also. But mitzvahs are the ratzon ha'elyon. They're the ultimate ratzon. Hashem, the reason why Hashem wants this cup is for a reason. Yeah, it's a ratzon which is based on chachma. The reason is because so I should be able to teach Tanya and still be up. That's why this cup was created. It's not a ratzon atzmi. It's not an essential ratzon in this cup. But mitzvahs are ratzon ha'elyon. They're the highest ratzon. They're the most essential ratzon of Hashem. So if there was no reason for them, the ratzon can never change. The only way possible for the ratzon to change, if ratzon is me, remember we said earlier, ratzon is me. The only way for my ratzon to change is if I change. But ani Hashem lishanisi, Hashem doesn't change. So if Hashem doesn't change and his ratzon is him, then the ratzon can change, the mitzvahs can't change. A little of an example for this. The fact that parents love their children is not logical. Makes no sense. Sorry?
Parenthood period, if you look at it. Just the material requirements.
I don't understand what you're saying.
No, from pure cost benefit analysis. Even having children.
It doesn't make sense to have children. Okay. But right now I'm focusing on a certain thing. The fact that parents love their children is not logical. Okay? Logically, of all the people in the world I shall love my children. The other people maybe are more deserving or needing of my love. And the love of a parent, because it's not logical, it's the most durable love, right? It doesn't change. My kid is a good kid, my kid is a bad kid, my kid is a smart kid, my kid is a stupid kid. My kid is extremely abled, my kid is extremely disabled. It doesn't make a difference because it's not something which is... And therefore that love doesn't change. And if it does change, by the way, it's because I changed. There is no outside circumstance. That means I changed. And by Hashem, there's no such thing as him changing. Ani Hashem lishanisi. Now, by the way, if you go to scientists and ask you, why do parents love their children? They'll give you reasons, by the way. But that's a perfect example of chachma that follows the fact. Meaning, if the nature was that we didn't love our children, if our nature was that we only loved our children if they were nice, or we only loved our children if they were nice to us, or if they then the scientists would have a perfect explanation for that. And if our nature was that we loved all the children in our neighborhood equally, that would also, in other words, because it's not logical that we love our children. It's a fact of nature, which is then examined. And the same thing is with the Eibusher. So when we say Zois HaTorah Leitehi Muchlefes, it's actually an expression of a very, very deep idea. When we're doing mitzvahs, the knowledge of, if I think that a mitzvah could change, the reason why it's important to know that Zois HaTorah Leitehi Muchlefes is because if I believe that a mitzvah could be changed, then I'm misunderstanding what a mitzvah is. I'm misunderstanding the depth and the amazingness of a mitzvah. I think a mitzvah is to accomplish a certain goal. Hashem has a certain goal or desire, a certain logic, and the mitzvah is, no, the mitzvah is the essence of Hashem's Ratzon. And you doing a mitzvah is what Hashem wants, not for any reason. Hashem doesn't want you to shake lulav and esrog because of any reason. If it was because, if you shake lulav and esrog, it'll bring about that benefit. Okay, so if circumstances changed and shaking lulav and esrog didn't bring out that benefit, and dafka changed, shaking the pineapple will bring out that benefit, then Hashem would change. But it's not. Hashem just wants you to take a lulav and a esrog and a ravitz and a dasim and shake it. There is no reason, there is no rhyme, there is nothing to be gained. That's the ratzon ha'atzmi of Hashem. It's the essential desire of Hashem. Hashem wants you to put a mezuzah on your door. He wants you to eat kosher. These are essential ratzon of Hashem. Where is the ratzon of Hashem revealed? But specifically in Torah Shebaal Peh. Hashem's ratzon is contained in Torah Shebiksav. But where is the gilui? As Alter Rebbe says, Torah Shebaal Peh is gilui ratzon ha'elyon. Where is the gilui of Hashem's ratzon? It's in Torah Shebaal Peh. You open up a Torah Shebiksav, and what does it say over there? It says, don't work on Shabbos. Okay, I can't work on Shabbos. Now imagine if you had no Torah Shebaal Peh. What does that imply? We have no clue what Hashem's ratzon is. It's there, it's hidden, it's embedded. But the gilui of Hashem's ratzon, which is that don't work on Shabbos means these 39 malachas, that's in Torah Shebaal Peh. And rationally, I would not arrive there on my own. If you were to come and tell me, it says don't work on Shabbos, so therefore, don't flip the light switch, because that's work. But I live on the 6th floor of my building. To schlep sich down the 6 flights, and to go find a goy, to make myself meshuga, to get him to come into my house, and then to try to somehow hint to him that maybe a light needs to be turned on or off, which I'm not getting into whether that's allowed or not, but let's say theoretically it was in a situation. That's not work, that's fine. Verstehst? Turning on my light, that's work. But running down to the street and huffing up the 6 flights of stairs and running around that's allowed. We would, again, if you just read in the Torah where it says Lei Sasa Malacha, I'd have no idea. Okay, you tell me that opening up a milk carton is malacha, but me schlepping a table from one room to the next, or 10 tables from one room to the next, that's fine. That's why the gilui of Hashem's ratzon is dafka and Torah Shebaal Peh. The Torah Shebaal tells us, by the way, these examples I'm giving you, the Alter Rebbe gives it later on in Iggeres HaKodesh, Siman Chavtes. He gives this example of Malach on Shabbos, and he says the same thing when it comes to Tefillin. Imagine you had no Torah Shebaal Peh, and you just had those psukim. What am I tying? Where am I tying? No, Torah Shebaal Peh says it means they have to have boxes, and they have to have leather straps, and leather straps have to be black. And all the gilui of the Ratzon Elyon, the gilui of Ratzon Hashem is dafka in Torah Shebaal Peh, which is interesting. Because Torah Shebaal Peh, we're talking about the male-female dynamic. We said Torah Shebaal Peh is Chesed and Gvura. Torah Shebaal Peh is also Zachar and Nekeva. Torah Shebaal Peh is masculine. Shma bini Musar Avicha, Torah Shebiksav. Val titesh Torah Simecha, Torah Shebaal Peh is feminine. Why is Torah Shebaal Peh feminine? Because just like in the Zachar and Nekeva, the Zachar is the Mashpia, and the Nekeva is the Mekabel. So obviously in the Torah Shebaal Peh and Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebiksav is the Mashpia, and Torah Shebaal Peh is the Mekabel, and it goes deeper than that. In terms of the creation of a child, so you know that the father supplies a very, very condensed, DNA-filled drop, and the mother takes that drop and develops it for 9 months until it becomes a full child. And the same thing is also Torah Shebiksav. You get one word, one letter, right? Rabbi Kiva, he would find a tag on top of a letter and build from that Tili Tilim Shal Halacha. So the idea of the development of the ideas, which in Torah Shebiksav are in very, very seminal form, and they're completely developed in Torah Shebal Peh. So Torah Shebal Peh is compared to the father, the man, and Torah Shebal Peh to the woman. So when we say Eishes Chayil, so Eishes Chayil is also a reference to Torah Shebal Peh, for that reason. So there's a pasuk that says Eishes Chayil Ateres Baila. The woman, the Eishes Chayil, which is a reference to Torah Shebal Peh, at least in our. By the way, even the word Eishes Chayil, it means the Isha who produces Chayalim, the Isha who produces the legions, the armies, which is like Torah Shebal Peh, who's the Isha, the woman, who produces Mesechtes and everything we have over here times Ein Seif. So Torah Shebal Peh is the Eishes Chayil. Ateres Baila, she is the crown of her husband. Her husband again is Torah Shebiksav. Torah Shebal Peh is the crown of Torah Shebiksav. What does the crown represent? Her crown represents Ratzon, which is above. The crown represents that which is above Chachma. So it represents Hashem's Ratzon. So Torah Shebal Peh, even though that it's the Eishes Chayil, even though it's Mikabel from Torah Shebiksav, nevertheless, Ateres Baila, this is where the crown of, she's the crown of her husband, because on her is the Gilui of Hashem's Ratzon, which is the crown which is above the head, which is above the Chachma. Let's do this inside. I want to read again from the beginning. Achmi, let's go back a few lines, because now that we did it outside, we'll see inside how this works. However, who is it, or what is it, that gives the strength to the Masnaim, which is the Emunah, Lahamid or Lakaim Marish Vazreis? What gives the strength to the Emunah, which then supports the head and the arms? Who Esek Velimud Halachis B'Torah Shebal Peh. That's specifically what gives strength, what gives the Ois to the Masnaim, is the study of the Halachis and Torah Shebal Peh. Shehi, why is that? Because the halachas and Torah Shebal Peh is bechinas gili ratzon elyon. That is where's nesgala, the ratzon elyon, the Hashem's highest ratzon. Why is that? The iraisa mechachma hid denafkas. Torah emerges from chachma. Aval, however, mekoyre v'sharsha, the makir of Torah l'mayla bechinas chachma is much higher than chachma. What is the real marker of everything in Torah is the Ratzon. And as the pasuk says, Katsina Ratzon te'atrenu, like a shield, we are crowned by Hashem's Ratzon. So we see that the idea of Ratzon is like an atara. Ratzon is like a crown which is above the head, above the chachma. Ka'atara, like a crown, Shehi al ha-moichin shebereish, which is above the moichin that's in the head.
Where is this written? Mashkasa?
Kneda Mashakasav al pasuk. Where's what written? The Katsina Ratzon Tadranu?
Yeah.
It's a pasuk in Tehillim.
Oh.
Kneda, I don't remember which capital, but it's a Katsina Ratzon Tadranu is a pasuk in Tehillim. Kneda Mashakasav al pasuk Eishes Chayil al Teres Baila. As it says in the pasuk Eishes Chayil al Teres Baila. I think Eishes Chayil al Teres Baila is a pasuk in Kehelis or Mishli.
Mishli.
So Eishes Chayil, that even though the Torah Shebal Peh is called the Eishes Chayil, but it's a Teres Baila that is the crown of her husband. And that's why that's why we say that Kol Hashem halachas b'chol yom muftach le'ishu ben elam haba. So the question is, why Shena halachas? We should say Kol halay Torah b'chol yom. If you learn Torah, you're a ben elam haba. What's dafka Shena halachas?
Because that's the Gilui Ratzon.
Because the gili of the highest, the sheder shemakar of Torah, which is the Ratzon, where is it? Nesgala in halachas of Torah, because that's the Ratzon. There is the Ratzon's begili. Yeah, in Torah there's the Chachma in Torah, but ultimately the source of Torah is not Chachma. The source of Torah is the Ratzon. Kol Hashem halachis b'chol yom muftach le'ishu ben elam haba. And as Alter Rebbe explains later on, again, the inyanim in this siman are going to be expanded upon later on in siman Chavtes in Iggeres HaKodesh, in the 29th letter in Iggeres HaKodesh, which we'll get there in a while. Where there Alter Rebbe explains that the Oyer Ein Sof in Olam Haba is so strong and potent that we need to arm ourselves with the strength to be able to appreciate it or to be able to handle it. How do we do that? When we learn halachas every single day, because the halachas is the Oyer Ein Sof, the Ratzon of Hashem, the Oyer Ein Sof. By learning halachas, we're giving ourselves the strength to be able to accept the incredible pleasures which is Gan Eden. I mean, before we even go any further, just if you just take a moment to think what that means that when you wake up in the morning, or before you go to sleep at night, and you pull out a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and you learn a halacha or two or three, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah, Kaf HaChaim, whatever it may be, but you sit and you learn some halachas. So maybe you don't have the same geschmack as sitting and learning a Daf Gemara. But actually, a lot of times in Gemara also you have halachas, but I'm saying you can learn it. I in a Gemara. There is something about learning halachas that in the halachas, the Hashem's Ratzon, which is the Oyer Ein Sof, is revealed in the rawest form, dafke in the chelak of halachas and Torah. V'zehu, and this is what the pasuk says: Chagra be'ez masnaham. That ein oiz ala Torah. That we said that Klal Yisrael, we strengthen our masnayim, we strengthen our amunah with oiz. And what is oiz? Oiz is Torah. Shehin noisen as koyach v'oiz. The Torah, and again specifically the oiz in Torah, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the halachas in Torah Sheba'al Peh, is what gives the koyach v'oiz the strength. Lebechinas masnayim, to the masnayim, the loins, the amunah, hachagurim umulubashim ba, which the amunah is girded by and enclosed by this Torah. And this causes it to strengthen its arms. That is the intellectual emotions that we have towards Hashem, or the instinctual emotions that we have to Hashem. Everyone according to their own abilities. So Alter Rebbe is saying, the Yesod of Yiddishkeit is our amunah. And how do we keep our amunah? Because the amunah supports everything, including the zrayis, the chesed, the yira, our emotions to Hashem. But how do we support our amunah? How do we make sure that our amunah is robust and it's strong and it is girded with strength? That's by learning the halachas of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Because the halachas of Torah Sheba'al Peh is the Ratzon Elyon, it is such a high oyer. There's a oyer in Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is not to be found even in Torah Shebiksav, the gilui of that oyer. And therefore, by learning halachas, we're actually strengthening our amunah. When we strengthen our amunah, automatically that strengthens everything else. That strengthens over here, he's talking about the Zrayas, that strengthens our Avas Hashem, and it strengthens our Yiras Hashem as well. And then the Alter Rebbe continues in the brackets, Valhamadas v'kiyum b'chinas hareisha b'nefesh. In other words, this pasuk says, Chagra ba'oiz masneha, that we strengthen with oiz, with Torah Sheba'al Peh, the masnaim, which is the amunah, vata'amij riyaseh, which then that in turn strengthens also our arms, which is our avos Hashem and yiras Hashem. Valamadas v'kiyum b'chinas hareisha b'nefesh. But remember, earlier we said also that the masnaim, they hold up the head. So where do we find that in the pasuk? The pasuk only says vata'amij riyaseh. The pasuk only says that it strengthens the arms. Valamadas v'kiyum b'chinas hareisha b'nefesh. The fact that the masnaim also hold up the head, he has seichel. What is the head? The head is the seichel amizbein and chulu. Amar. Therefore, what is the next pasuk? Talk about every pasuk. We look at, you sing Yeshes Chayil Chagreis Beis Masna without understanding what's going on in these pasukim over here. And what is the next pasuk? Ta'ama kitev sachra. Chulu umavur b'makam acher. The Alter Rebbe says, as explained elsewhere. Actually, after the Alter Rebbe wrote this letter, he wrote a follow-up mimer explaining this idea of Ta'ama kitev sachra. So he says, as explained elsewhere.
Translation.
We'll get there, but it says explained elsewhere, he means a mimer which he wrote specifically to explain this concept. And the mimer begins to understand that which we said in this letter. The pasuk Ta'ama kitev sachra literally means Ta'ama, she tasted and she saw kitev sachra, that her business is good. So in a literal sense, it means chveis. Maybe she has a gefilte fish business and she tastes that it's good. Yeah. But in a deeper sense, Ta'ama kitev sachra Ta'ama refers to seichel. Whenever we talk about tam, gishmak, that's in seichel. The ability, ratzon is not ta'ama. Ratzon is not, doesn't taste good. When you understand something, and you're able to, dig your teeth into it, and understand something, that's a gishmak. Ta'ama, how is it that Klal Yisrael is able to have the ta'ama, to have the seichel, the reish? Ki toiv sachra, that's because of the goodness of sachra. And what does sachra mean? The word soicher means to surround. Schoir. Even the word soicher is because a merchant is busy constantly circulating, going around. So the sachra is also the atara, is the ratzon. So the pasuk says, chagra ba'oiz masneha. So with the Klal Yisrael, we use oiz teresh Baal Peh to strengthen our amunah. Vata'am Israel, that strengthens our avos Hashem and yiras Hashem. And the next pasuk in 6 says, and also ta'ama, also our ability to have seichel, the head. Our head is also supported by Kitav Sachra, also by this level in Torah, the level of Atara, which is also the Torah Shabbat Peh, the halachas of Torah Shabbat Peh. Like, everyone a good Shabbos.